Pastor Doug here from Crossroads. It's great to be with you. I hope that today's message will draw you closer to Jesus.
Have you ever really intended to do something and then ended up not doing it at all? I have one of these that just plagued me for years. Ever since we bought our house. When we bought our house, they had just reseeded our lawn. And ever since then, whenever the lawn comes in for the spring, it's just as much weeds and clover as it is grass. And it bothers me. It has bothered me for years. I used to work on grounds maintenance at a country club, and so I cannot tolerate grass full of clover and weeds. And every single year, I say, this is the year I'm going to tackle this. This is the year I'm going to do something about it. And every single year, it doesn't happen. But this year, I was determined this year was going to be different. This spring, I went out and I did some research on what I wanted to get. I made sure that I was going to know what type of grass I had, what to put down, all this type of stuff. I went to Home Depot. I bought 3 bags of stuff that was different seeds and fertilizers and weed stuff, all that stuff. And I went and I got this and I sat it down. I'm like, this is the year I'm going to take care of this. All 3 of those bags are still sitting in the exact same place in the basement as when I bought them and put them down there this spring. They have not moved 1 inch. For some reason, I just cannot get my intention to do my lawn into the place where I actually do my lawn. In reality, I really intended that this was going to be the year I was going to fix this. But it just became another unintentional decision not to yet again this year. Now, if you polled each one of us, we want to make good decisions. We do. We want to make good decisions. We want to avoid making bad decisions. We all have great intentions. The problem is there can be a breakdown a lot of times between our intentions for our lives and the reality of our lives. We really intend to eat healthy and go to the gym. The reality is maybe there was only a couple of meals this week that didn't involve French fries. Or our version of getting fruit is, strawberry ice cream has actual fruit in it, right? Our version of exercise is going up and down the front steps a couple times a day. We intend that we're going to get up early. We're going to read our Bibles. But snooze is a very easy button. And small children have unpredictable wake-up times. We intend that we're going to spend time on our hobbies and our side projects. But the reality is Netflix exists, and that happens. We really intend to connect with friends. But then we schedule every single thing that comes our way, and all of a sudden there's no room on the calendar. We intend to trust God with our cares. But in reality, we continue letting the news drive our emotions and our anxieties to the point where we're almost panicked. It happens to us. The intention for our lives and the reality of our lives don't always match up. Now, we're in the second and final week of our series on decision making called Think Ahead. And last week, one of the things we talked about was that the quality of our decisions becomes the quality of our lives. The quality of our decisions becomes the quality of our lives. So how do we make sure that our good intentions, those intentions we have to add good, godly things into our lives, the intentions we have to avoid costly, bad things, how do we make sure that they don't become, kind of like my yard, unintentional bad decisions, but instead that they end up becoming reality in our lives? Last week we looked at examples of people who made bad decisions that nearly wrecked their lives. This week we're going to do the opposite. We're going to look at examples of people who made different sets of decisions, that ones that help them avoid all the bad decisions and ones that set them up for success now and in the future. So let's look at our first example. Our first example comes to us from Job. If you're going to be turning with us, we're going to be in Job 31 this morning. But if you're not familiar with Job, the Bible character, Job was a faithful man. Job was a faithful man thrust into the middle of extremely tough circumstances. Circumstances we do not have time to get into fully this morning, but suffice it to say, he was in a lot of incredibly tough circumstances. Now, the part of the story we're going to pick up with Job, Job is spending this part of his story examining his life. He's taking a deep look at his own life. He's trying to determine if there's any area of his life where he's been making bad, sinful decisions. And as he's examining and he's looking at his own life, he's talking to God about what he's seeing. And in verse 9 in Job 31, Job makes this extraordinary statement. He says, "If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then may my wife grind another man's grain, and may other men sleep with her." That's a statement. That is quite the statement from Job. If we're not quite sure exactly what he's getting at here, here's what he's saying. He's saying, look, I have searched my heart, I have searched my life, and I am convinced that I have not sinned in this area. I have not made any bad decisions in this area. And if I'm wrong, I'm fine with my wife grinding another man's grain. That doesn't sound like a great statement. That sounds rough. But talk about a flex here. He is so completely certain that he has not made bad decisions in such a huge area of temptation. Think about areas of your life where you tend to make bad decisions, or areas where you personally feel like you've been most tempted. If you were to do like Job did, if you were to take a moment and just thoroughly examine your life, would you be able to make a statement like this? Would you be able to make a declaration that certain about your decision making in those particular areas? I don't know about you, but I would love to have that level of confidence in my decision making around areas where I tend to make bad decisions or areas where we're tempted. I would love to have that level of confidence. So what's Job's secret? What's his secret? How is Job able to avoid making the kinds of bad decisions around areas of temptation that have brought so many people down? Well, to answer that question, we have to go back to the beginning of the chapter. And Job makes a statement at the beginning of the chapter that tells us how he was able to do this. In verse 1, he says, "I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman." I made a covenant with my eyes. How was Job able to be so confident and so certain in his decision making? Because he'd pre-decided. He had pre-decided. Now, if that term sounds familiar, if you joined us on our New Year's service, I briefly introduced the concept of pre-decision, and I thought it was worth revisiting in more detail this morning. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term pre-decide, it basically means this. It means to decide in advance what you're going to do. To decide in advance what you're going to do. You make a statement sort of like, when I'm faced with whatever the situation is, I have pre-decided that I'm going to do this. Job pre-decided in advance how he was going to handle moments of sexual temptation. And this pre-decision allowed him to have success in an area where most people struggle. And we can use pre-deciding to find success in areas where we might be tempted to make bad decisions, or areas in our lives where we face temptation. Let me give you just a brief example of how pre-deciding can work. Now, when we talked about this in December, I said that one of the things I was working on, one of the pre-decisions I was going to make, was working on eating healthier. And this spring, I knew I was headed to Nashville for a conference. And one of the things I know from past experiences is that I eat absolutely terrible when I'm at airports. I eat absolutely terrible when I go to airports. It always happens the same way. Whenever I arrive at an airport, I am always hungry. No matter what time it is, I'm always hungry when I arrive at the airport. And as that old Snickers commercial would say, you are not you when you're hungry. How many of you tend to make bad decisions when you're hungry? Yeah, it happens quite a bit. So what always happens is I'm hungry, I go to the airport, I get through security, and I immediately order like the first fried monstrosity I can get my hands on. You know, something that has like a calorie count in the thousands and a fat content like higher than most people's IQ. It's so bad. And this time, I didn't want to have the same problem. I was like, I do not want to continue making bad food decisions at the airport. I don't want to continue having this temptation. So I decided I was going to make a pre-decision. I decided in advance that when I get to the airport, I am going to find the healthiest thing I can eat, and I'm going to eat that. That was my pre-decision. So when I arrived at the airport, predictably, once again, I was hungry. But I didn't have to worry about what I was going to do because I had already decided, I had pre-decided what I was going to do. So on the way out to the conference, I found a protein bowl stand and I was able to get a protein grain bowl. On the way back, I got a chicken wrap and a protein smoothie. All of a sudden, I avoided the temptation to order terrible food at the airport because I pre-decided. So why does pre-deciding work? Why does pre-deciding help us deal with bad decisions and temptations? I think Craig Rochelle, who wrote the book Think Ahead, perfectly describes the principle behind pre-deciding with this statement. Why resist a temptation tomorrow if we have the power to eliminate it today? Why resist a temptation tomorrow if we have a power to eliminate it today? That's what pre-deciding does. That's what Job did. Job pre-decided how he was going to handle moments of lust and sexual temptation. He made a plan in advance, and that plan cut temptation off right at its source. He said, I made a covenant with my eyes. He pre-decided that he would not look at anything that would cause him lust. That meant avoiding places or avoiding things that might tempt him. If his eyes did see something, he had pre-decided that he would not let that translate into his mind as lust. No second looks, no long stares or glances. He had pre-decided to cut off sexual temptation right at the root where it was small before it could grow into something larger. Pre-decision works because it not only reduces the number of decisions we have to make, but it prevents that emotional takeover that so often exists in our lives. Pre-decision allows you to make decisions when you're calmer, when you're less emotional, when you're less tempted. When we think ahead, when we pre-decide, we make better decisions. We make decisions in advance that can reduce or can eliminate temptation and bad decisions. So let me ask you this question again. Where do you find yourself regularly making bad decisions? In what areas of your life do you find yourself most tempted? If you know these areas, then we have the opportunity to think ahead and make pre-decisions. Pre-decisions can be the difference between not intending to mess up and actually making a plan not to. So what pre-decisions can you make in these areas that might help you reduce or eliminate potential temptation or bad decisions? What pre-decisions could you make? Now, as you're thinking through that, there's a couple of tools that I can talk to you about that will help you maybe formulate some pre-decisions or help you figure out in what areas to make pre-decisions. And one of those tools is the idea of guardrails. We can pre-decide to put boundaries or guardrails in our lives. These are practical things we can do that can prevent or can reduce opportunities in our life to make bad decisions or give in to temptation. Author Craig Rochelle gives a detail about one of his when it comes to digital temptation. His wife and his assistant have the passwords to all of his devices, all his computers, phones, all of that stuff. His wife has the passwords, his assistant has the passwords. He actually does not have access to his own app store. If he's going to download an app, his assistant has to pre-clear that and allow him to download things. Now, he says sometimes that gives him problems and he runs into issues. But these are guardrails that he was put in place so that he doesn't have to struggle in these areas. And there's one that has been helpful for me in my life. And it's not one that I would recommend for everybody, but it's something that has been useful for me and helpful for me. And that I pre-decided a long time ago that I was not going to drink alcohol. And for me, this decision came around the area of the fact that I have a lot of family history of struggles with alcohol and alcoholism. My family has a long history of this, and it's affected numerous members of my family. And I know there's a partial genetic component to some of this. And so I couldn't predict and did not know how my body would respond to alcohol. So I knew I did not want to struggle in this area. So a long time ago, I made the decision that I just wasn't going to touch it at all. That was a pre-decision I was able to make because I knew that if I did that, I would never have that issue. I would never have that temptation. I would never have that struggle. So for me personally, that's something that I chose to do. Now, that was a personal decision. That's not a moral imperative that everyone has to take on. But it's something that I knew that I could do to prevent myself from struggling in that particular area. So what specific guardrails could you put in place around areas where you might be tempted? Are there apps you need to delete? Are there places you need to not go? Are there things you need to just not watch? Guardrails. The second one, the second tool that we can use to kind of help us make pre-decisions around bad decisions and temptation is to plan your escape routes. If you do run into temptation, if the guardrails or whatever doesn't work up, and we still all will face temptation, if you do run into temptation, decide in advance what your escape routes are going to be. I think the funny example of this is always, I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but the classic, you're going out on a first date with somebody, and so you have your friend pre-schedule a call to you like 20 minutes into the date in case it's going horribly, so that you have an escape route and you can get out of there. That's the type of thing we're talking about. Decide in advance, if I run into a situation, what is my escape route? Remember Joseph in the Old Testament, the story of Joseph. He got cornered by Potiphar's wife, and his escape route was literally to flee and leave the house. But we can make decisions that say, like, when I'm tempted to watch or do something I shouldn't, maybe I'll just leave the house. Maybe I'll just go out for a walk. If I start being tempted, I'll just go out for a walk. Or when I'm tempted in this particular area, I will call a friend and talk to them. This is the system that's worked so well for groups like NA and AA, this idea of when I'm tempted, I will call somebody. So plan an escape route. Find a specific way which when I am tempted in this area, I will do this. There's lots of ways we can do that. But now here's the thing. We don't just want to avoid temptation in our lives, do we? We want to make good decisions. We want to make decisions that are going to add to our life, that are going to help us grow. So let's look at another figure who gives us a great example of pre-decision in this particular area, and that's Joshua. Now, Joshua was the leader of Israel, and he led the people of Israel for many, many years. And near the end of his life, he calls together all of the leaders of all of the tribes of Israel. And he's going to give them an impassioned motivational speech. And he's going to ask them to declare their intentions about what they want going forward. So let's look at that in Joshua 24. And we're going to start in verse 14. Now, fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. So Israel had struggled, and honestly, they would continue to struggle with worshiping other gods. But Joshua is calling the leadership to make a pre-decision, declare out loud whom they will serve. He's asking them to pre-decide how they will live their lives. And he follows this bold challenge with a bold statement of his own. At the end of that verse, he says, "But for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." For me and my household, we to serve the Lord. Joshua had already made his pre-decision. I will serve the Lord. I will be faithful. But not just me, my entire family. So what's going on here? Why is Joshua calling the leaders of Israel to declare, to pre-decide whom they will serve? This isn't really a pre-decision about temptation necessarily. This is a pre-decision about what they want for the future. Now, we talked earlier about our intentions and how most people intend good things for their lives. Everyone wants to live with purpose. We want to be good parents. We desire to grow. We desire to be more generous. We want to be closer to God. We want to make an impact. We intend all of these things. But so often in life, things come in that prevent that from becoming a reality. This is where pre-decision can have such a big role. What Joshua is doing here in his own life and what he's calling on the leaders of Israel to do isn't just to make a statement. It's to pre-decide a path, to pre-decide a direction that they want for their lives. These are not just words. They're a vision for the future. Pre-deciding can have a dramatic effect on the way we live our lives. There's kind of an interesting example of this in the movie Yes Man. You knew you weren't going to get out of here with without one movie reference, right? So the movie Yes Man is an interesting movie starring Jim Carrey. And in this movie, his life is completely stuck. He is stuck. He's going nowhere. He's avoiding his friends. He says no to everything in his life, and his life is terrible. All of a sudden, one time he goes to a motivational speaker, and as a result of this, he ends up making a covenant, a pre-decision, as you would, to say yes to everything. He's just going to say yes to anything that comes his way. And almost immediately, and often to humorous effect, this begins to have a change on his life. His pre-decision to say yes all of a sudden leads to a whole host of new experiences for him, new friendships. He starts actually having an impact at work. He suddenly finds that he is able to start having an impact on the people and the lives of people around him. He becomes an encourager. He's supportive. And he even at one point ends up saving a life. And of course, he meets the girl of his dreams because it's a movie. But why are pre-decisions about what we want in our lives so powerful? They're powerful because our declarations and our words have real power. I was watching a YouTube video this week, and this is one of the quotes. Words have power, tremendous power. They shape the atmosphere around you and the beliefs within you. What you repeatedly say becomes what you start to believe, and what you believe dictates how you behave. When we pre-decide what we want in our lives, it starts to shape our thoughts. Our thoughts start to shape our decisions, and our decisions determine our future. Like Jim Carrey in the movie, when he started making the decision to say yes, it shifted his thoughts. He began to see opportunities where he hadn't before. And once he decided to take advantage of those opportunities, it changed him, and it changed his life. Now, how does this work? Let's say in your life, you make a pre-decision that you want to be a more generous person, that you want to live a life of generosity. Declaring that in your life and declaring that over and over again starts to shape your thoughts and align your thoughts around that idea. You start beginning to see, and God starts showing you in your life, opportunities to be generous. And you start seeing and recognizing those opportunities to be generous. Then every time you take advantage of that opportunity to be generous, it changes you a little bit. Then you start to see more opportunities to be generous. And the more you take advantage of those opportunities, and that cycle repeats over and over again. And before long, you are a person who is generous. That's your life now. So let me ask you, what is it you want for your life? What is it that God is calling you to? Maybe you want to be that couple that prays together. Maybe you want to be someone who reads God's word regularly. Maybe you want to be a person who's generous with time and money, like our example. Maybe you want to be fit and healthy. Maybe you want to be an encourager. What pre-decision could you make that will start moving you in that direction? What pre-decision could you make? Now, what are some tools that we can use to help us kind of craft pre-decisions along these areas? The first tool I want you to look at is declare it out loud. If you're going to make a pre-decision, kind of like Joshua, declare it out loud. Say it out loud. Repeat it. Put it on your wall. Keep it around you so that you see it on a regular basis. That repetition will start working its way into your head. For example, I will be a person who is healthy and in shape. I will be a person who puts my family first. I will be a person who encourages everyone around me. Make that statement and let that start to affect your thoughts. And then watch as God starts providing openings and revealing opportunities to you for you to act on that. And as you start making those pre-decisions, here's another tool that you can keep in mind. Make it easy. Make it easy. Don't fall into the trap of when you start trying to do things, of overcomplicating it, of overcommitting yourself, of overburdening yourself at the start. People do this at the gym all the time. They sign up for a gym. They go in and they work out really hard that first day, and they come home and they are so sore or they are injured and they never go back again. Don't make that mistake. Start out. Keep it easy at the beginning. Make small, easy decisions. If you want to be that person who prays or reads your Bible every day, start by saying, I'm going to try and do it for 5 minutes. Start with 5 minutes. Want to be the person who eats healthy? Start with one snack or one meal. You want to be generous? Start by giving like an additional $10 or additional $20 to something. Don't make it too hard at the start. Find other ways to make it easy. Go back to the Bible reading example. If you want to read your Bible every day, sit your Bible on your kitchen table. That way when you bring your breakfast and you start eating your breakfast, it's right there. Another opportunity is pack your gym clothes the night before. Put them in your car. Want to pray more regularly? Pray when you're in the shower. If you're going to shower every day, you got time. Might as well use that to work on your prayer habit. And another tool that you can use is to use soundtracks. Use soundtracks. Soundtracks are repeated phrases that we tell ourselves over and over again. Now, often when we're trying to make good decisions, we encounter resistance. We encounter resistance from our old habits. We encounter resistance from the enemy. We encounter resistance from our own thoughts. So having soundtracks can be a huge help. Sometimes those soundtracks are verses. Sometimes those soundtracks are just things we develop, sayings we develop in our life. I've been using some of those a lot recently. About 6 weeks ago, I switched to running at 6 a.m. in the morning because it was too hot out, and almost every summer I give up on running when it gets too hot out. So this year I wasn't going to do it. I'm going to get up at 6 and run. And the first few mornings were rough. I had a really hard time doing that. But what happened was interesting. I had soundtracks that I had been working on for a few weeks that came up to me in those moments when I was tempted to go back to bed. One of them was Tired Beats Regretful. That's been something I was repeating to myself. Tired Beats Regretful. So I use that phrase in the morning. I'll be tired, but I'll regret not running later. And the other one I use is kind of one I use for different circumstances. It was, tired doesn't win, I win. Whatever circumstances, just fill in the first part of the word. Tired doesn't win, I win. And for whatever reason, having those two phrases in my head got me out of the bed the first few mornings when I was tired. So what are some soundtracks that you might be able to develop that could help you in moments where you're struggling, where you need encouragement to make a good decision? Develop some. Write them down. You'd be surprised at the impact they can have. So in conclusion, the quality of our decisions becomes the quality of our lives. If we want to make better decisions, let's follow the example of Job. Let's follow the example of Joshua. Let's think ahead and begin pre-deciding. Make pre-decisions around areas that tempt us. Make pre-decisions around the healthy, godly things we want to add into our lives. And let's apply the tools that we can to those pre-decisions to help us implement them, to help us turn them into action. Let's become people who don't plan to fail, but also plan not to. Let's be people who don't just intend to improve our lives, but who turn those intentions into reality. If you want to respond today, on your connection card, there's two ways you can respond. And maybe you'll need some more time with this to develop this. If you can, do that this week. But what pre-decisions can you make in your life? What's one pre-decision that you can make in your life? And is there a specific tool that you could use to help you out in that area? If you know that, write it down in your connection card. If not, take that idea home with you this week and use that.
Thanks again for listening. Any step you take towards Jesus is a step in the right direction. You can find out more about us at crbic.org. That's crbic.org.